Hey, wise. Listen, if y'all hear a kid in the background, please excuse me. That is my 15-year-old who, um, he's a gamer. And so they sit on those video games all day long. But listen, I wanted to come in. On this day. Now, I know this does not look like an administrative day to you, but this is an administrative day for Coach T, okay? And sometimes administrative days, you get an opportunity to kind of like think clearly and hear from God clearly. And one of the things that he brought to my attention today was about when children, have to deal with the mental distress of their parents' situation, right? When children have to deal with the mental distress of their parent situation. And you have to understand why, just like you are feeling it and going through and, feeling those aches and moans, you have to understand your children are going through the same thing. And that's one of the reasons why it is so important for you to make sure that you are taking care of yourself. That is why it is so important that you make sure that you are prioritizing yourself and that you are making yourself available, present, and that you are healthy in front of that child. Okay. So briefly, I want to just share with you that one over there that's making that noise right now. You hear him? I remember when his father left, he was, I think, 6.5, maybe 6.5, almost 7. He was getting ready to turn 7. So he was 6.5. He was going to be 7 that year. And I remember it was his birthday. And for the longest, I could not figure out, what to do to make him, happy and how to, try to fix the situation and make it better for him. Him and his papa were like best friends, okay? They were best friends. Played video games together. They did everything together. His papa spoiled him. So when he left, it was traumatizing. It was traumatizing for him. And this kid, kind of like how he is now, loud. He was very like charismatic. He was very, vocal. He didn't mind walking up to people and, speaking to people and saying stuff to people or whatever. And so over that time period, he lost his voice. He stopped speaking. And so I remember him, I remember seeing like the downfall of him going through what he was going through. And, I was trying so hard. Like I would call some of his friends from the neighborhood over, I would try to buy things. I was trying to do things. And then, sometimes, trying to reach my husband. Sometimes we wasn't able to reach him or he wasn't able to, speak to him. And so, oh my God, it was so depressing for him. And so over the years, when we went into the fall year, they wanted to like do some evaluation over him. They wanted to do evaluation over him. And when they did that evaluation over him, they discovered that he had developed, I think it was called mutism is what it was. And so they couldn't understand like how this vibrant kid who was smart and making good grades and was doing so well, how this vibrant kid went from being like that to just quiet. The teachers couldn't get him to speak. The teachers couldn't get him to talk. He wasn't talking to his friends. They were sending things home and asking, is there any changes? Has anything happened? And of course I would try to like, tell them like, without telling them everything that, his father, is not in the home presently. He's kind of going through some things like that or whatever, but he developed this anxiety issue. And so, I remember, for many years, even after my husband returned back home, it was this look that my child had on his face. His eyes was like stretched wide, and he would always like had like this breathing issue. He had even had some issue with like his eyes. I had to take him to the doctor one time. I think it's called tics or something like that, where his eyes like kept blanking. And so he was really, really he was really, really experiencing some of that heaviness of his father not being home, or his father not being in the home. And man, when I tell you, that is another whole situation when it's your child. Okay, it's one thing when you, as the mother, as the wife, going through something, but when it's your child and you can't help your child. And I remember just like praying over him, especially when it came like to his eyes. I remember asking God, like, please heal his eyes, because he would just be, blanking, and he couldn't stop. And I remember taking him to the doctor, and the doctor was saying, it's nothing that they can do. Sometimes these kids develop these types of things. But I later learned that it was an anxiety, issue. And he did. I prayed that thing off of him. I'm like, he have to be able to, stop doing this or whatever. And so we didn't make a big deal about it, but I would put oil on his eyes. I would anoint his eyes with oil. Come on, Jesus. And I would do that. And so then when it came down to him speaking, he still is not fully comfortable. Like over the years, he developed that mutism. And I had to take him to a therapist. I had to take him to a therapist. And what she explained to me is that he just have like really, really, really bad anxiety. And so one of the things that the teachers would tell me to do, just kind of like to help them, they would, what should we do? Can we write notes? Do we have to use like, different gadgets? And so the way he would communicate with the teachers and stuff, he would like, type it up on a computer. He'll write them a note. And then one day, it was this one teacher like, he playing with y'all. It had came to a point where it was like he was taking advantage of it now. Like, he all right. And so that man was like, speak, son, like speak. And this man, he was a teacher, but he was also a minister. And I remember him telling him to speak. By this time I had been praying over my child for like, I don't know how long. I had been praying for him. And I would always tell him, because his middle name is Elijah. And so I would always tell him, boy, you are God's mouthpiece. You are God's mouthpiece. So you need to open up your mouth and speak. And I promise you, that man was in agreement with me. And we both stood next to him. And he was like, open up your mouth and talk. Because even after his papa had came home or whatever, he still was like very, very quiet. He still wasn't speaking clearly. And he got to about middle school. And that man was like, no, we're not going to do this, because he know how to talk. And when the other teachers heard him talk, they was like, they were so amazed that he could actually talk. Like, his voice is all deep and stuff. And so what we discovered was it wasn't no longer about the situation with his papa, but at this time his voice was changing, and he had a little itchy voice or whatever. And he didn't know how to, he was trying to transition through that or whatever. But now, child, he fine. He fine. But I said it to say, you have to understand, it's so important. It's so important. Why is that? Even your children are affected by this. They are affected by this. And you, as their mother, you have to know how to pray them through that. Okay. You, as a mother, have to be in a healthy mindset yourself. It's so vital for wives to get that, especially when children are involved. And I always tell wives, be honest with your kids. Don't try to sugarcoat nothing. Don't try to hide nothing. My son used to go over there to his papa, and his papa would always tell him that, he was coming back home. And so, of course, my son would come home and tell my mom, Papa said he's coming back home. He said he's coming back home. Well, my thing was, like, don't tell him that if you're not, really serious about that or whatever. And so I remember going to my husband and asking him, I said, Jaden told me that, you said you was coming back home. Is that, that's what the case? And he shook his head. He was like, but that was like, him shaking his head, saying that was like still like a year and a half. We still had to go before he actually came home. But I held on to that or whatever. And it was actually something that Jaden held on to. And so I would start giving him scriptures to read and start giving him scriptures to start praying. And one of the ones I would never forget, he wrote a note. I still have that note, a letter, hanging up in our room where I had my vision board and everything in the closet. One of the verses, on the summertime, they would be home, him and my oldest son. Now, my oldest son, that's a different story. You put the Bible in front of him, he might look at it. He's more of a, he had to he's more of an audio type of person. He needs to just hear it. But Jaden actually had like the Bible app on his phone. Jaden was actually reading scriptures every day. And so I would give them different verses while I was at work for them to read over the summertime. And I think it was in Psalms 27 when it says, even when your mother and your father has forsaken you, even when your mother and your father has forsaken you, the Lord will be with you. And so I would let them read the whole verse, the whole chapter. But it was that part that gravitated, him. It was that part that stood out to him. And I remember him writing about it. JD, he's very, he's like his mama, he liked to write. And so he wrote like a whole paragraph. And I remember reading it and just burst out in tears because the way he wrote it, and it was like he comprehend exactly what the Lord was saying in that Bible verse. And so I remember asking him, I said, tell me what this verse mean to you. Like, tell me what this verse means to you. And he was just like, well, even when I feel like, my papa has, deserted me, I know God is with me, like that. He said, I know God is with me. I know what God is with me. And listen, to this day, my baby still have his Bible app on his phone. We still, he still exchanged scriptures with me. He would send me scriptures and things. And so he still to this day will read his Bible app. So parents, you have to understand, mom, that your children are affected by this, but you get to make a decision. You get to make a decision how that boat goes. You get to make a decision how that thing goes. That you get to make a decision and stand in the middle of that situation and make a difference in their life. And they will grow up and see something and learn something that, yeah, I see my mom and dad go through this, but, God was so faithful and God seen my parents through and God was there with us the whole time. And, those kids will see that. They will see that. So mothers, listen, take heed. Healthy is attractive. Healthy is attractive even to your children. If you are in a situation like that and you are dealing with something like that with your kids, please understand you are their biggest influencer right now. You are their biggest influencer right now. And you get to you get to make a decision on which way this thing go. You get to help them make that decision, whether they go left or whether they go right. They can be angry, which is what my older son kind of took. My older son took the opposite effect of his papa being away from home. He turned into that angry child. He was very angry and rebellious or whatever. And he had a different attitude about it. But Jaden, my youngest son, he became very, very, very in tune with God. Was looking forward to going to church, looking forward to read the Bible. He became very aware, and he did begin to start talking. Not as much as he was in the beginning, because he's still a very shy kid, but he still did open up. And now he's radical. I have to close my door now when he began making all that noise. So listen, mothers, wives, you get to decide. You get to help your children overcome some of the obstacles that even you are going through in your marriage, all right? And so I thought I'd just share that with you today as a bonus message. Listen, I hope y'all having an awesome week. I'll talk to you soon. Blessings.